or naturally conceived human being?
Right. That's quite the question. I have no idea. But all right, when we get there, we'll cover that topic, I'm sure. Although it probably, if it had came up with the topic of do you count for a minion, it probably was in Chelik Aleph of the Mishnah Berurah. But when we get back around, when we finish everything, we'll get back to Chelik Aleph, and we'll see what he says there.
Yeah, next month.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, but can you hear? So I have this new table microphone. That way, when others at the table can speak, hopefully everyone can be heard. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes.
Lloyd, can you just, for the sake of testing, can you say testing 1, 2, 3?
Testing 1, 2.
Can you hear Lloyd much
Yes.
better than maybe you haven't week past when people are sitting around? Okay, fantastic. So Steve Smith is not on right now. I'm sorry I kept forgetting to use this thing, but now I have it in the office here. So we'll try to pull it out every week. So hopefully help the whole discussion around the table that way everyone can hear everybody. Okay. Last we left off, our heroes were discussing Chazara, and we talked quite at length about again, so the Tanai Chazara, the conditions under which Chazara can be done. We talked about the lenient position of the Ran, which is quoted as the practice of Ashkenazi Jews by the Ramah, and that required you to put the food or keep the food on the kira. Let's say today that would be a blech on top of the oven. The entirety of Bein Hashmashos, right, the beginning of Shabbos, and then once for sure it's it's already Shabbos. Once you get to 3 stars, like there's no question in the mind of a halachist whether it's Shabbos or not. It's certainly Shabbos, and therefore you can the conditions that we've talked about fall away in terms of what is I have to keep it in my hand and it can't touch the ground and I have to have it in mind, and these things are not necessary anymore. The only thing that is always necessary, no matter what, is that the heat source has to be garufa uktuma. It needs to either have scraped or swept away the coals, or ktuma again, which means covering the coals with ashes. So if either one of those is met, then you are able to return food. And according to this opinion of the Ramah, you would not need any of the other conditions so long as the food was on the fire at the beginning of Shabbos. Again, and because of the doubt about when Shabbos truly starts, right? As long as you have it there the entirety of Bein Hashmashos, between sunset and the 3 stars, that will suffice. Then you don't need to worry about Chazara anymore for those particular foods that were on the heat source.
So my question, I had a question on that. Supposing I'm using my oven and I've taped over all the controls, which is basically what Garufa and Ketuma is, right? So, right. So I can presumably take something out that was put in before Shabbat, take stuff out of it and put it back in the oven, correct?
So we saw that there was an opinion that interpreted, the Shulchan Aruch had mentioned this as a way to interpret this opinion of the Ramah, that you could even return it betoch hakira, right? And there were opinions that I'm just trying to look quickly with my eyes, scan with my eyes here, the Mishnah Berurah, that did not like the idea of placing it within, that they only, it could only be al gabe hakira, which would mean that it can't go inside an oven. It could go on top, like again using the stovetop, and presuming, let's say you have a blech on top of there to kind of distribute the heat. That would be okay. I'm just trying to look here where we saw that.
Because my question is, if you do that, you're opening the oven, you're taking something out, you're letting heat escape. So
right. So that's why you run into a separate problem, right? Forgetting the food part, you're going to run into a problem of you actually do want that oven to reheat whatever heat was lost, and therefore that may be it. That will not maybe that would be an issue of havara, because we all know how the ovens work. Whether even if it's an electric oven or a gas oven, right? That flame will, if it's a gas, so the flame will expand, right? That is undoubtedly an issue of havara. And then the other piece of it is that right. So you have a havara. I mean, that was it. And that's an issue, right? Because because you want it. It's not like a psikresha de lo nichale. It is nichale, right? You do, whether you admit it or not, you do benefit from the fact that it goes back up to whatever temperature it was set at. So yeah, that would be an issue, right? The putting it back in the oven, aside from it maybe being not the sort of lichatchila position here in this situation, you run into the havara issue as well. But Tommy, go ahead. Yeah, I see you.
But if you have, for example, today's ovens, which is Shabbat mode, which is Yom Kippur mode, whatever, those don't get affected by that.
Right, that's true. Right.
Right. So what was surprising to me about what we read was that it would seem that you could put it. I think there was other words of the Ramah even. He says, where's the Samazine? And I think where does he say it here? Right, in Samech Vav in the Mishnah Berurah here, he says that the minhag being referred to here was betocha tanur, right, inside the tanur. Right, again, in the days of the Ramah, there was no such thing as adjusting the temperature. But if you open the oven, it just got cooler. That's all. You didn't, unless you started playing with the coals, nothing happened. So he seems to say that so long as it hasn't cooled down, if you can control for that factor, it looks like you have something that's to rely upon here, right? There was a lenient opinion here. Like, yes, look, he does say tov lahachmer because he says ki harbe. This is the Samach Zayin at the beginning of Samach Zayin, the Mishnah Berurah. He says ki harbe poskim cholkin al Ran. Look, many disagree with the Ran outright. The Od, and furthermore, the Beis Yosef's interpretation of the Ran, right? Lo hitir ela al gabe hakira. The Beis Yosef, the Ramah certainly interpreted it as it can go in the Ran's words to mean in the kira would be fine, inside. But the Beis Yosef himself, even if you hold like the Ran, he would say, no. The Ran didn't say you can't put it into the kira. It could be on al gabe hakira, on top of the kira. So that's why I think I mentioned last week when we were covering this, I would try to stay away from that aside. But if somebody did it, the Ramah certainly seems to say, according to his interpretation, that in the kira, if it still hasn't cooled down all the way, and it was in their entire Bein Hashmashos, right? Then it's okay. Now, when we talk about Shabbos day, forget it. Once it's been cooled down to room temperature, then this goes out the window, right? So that's why this doesn't help for Shabbos day using the oven.
Yeah, but the Shabbat mode is specifically engineered so that when you open the oven and let heat escape, it doesn't automatically trigger the reheating mechanism.
Right.
It happens randomly.
Right. Absolutely. No, I am moda. All right. I'm admitting that there may be grounds here on Friday night to put food back into the oven as part of your Friday night meal. Right. Or I guess in theory, you could probably put it there and have it stay there until Shabbos day. I guess you could do that. I don't know if that's from a health perspective, is a good idea. I don't know. Is that or from a burns perspective?
Not so different from a crock pot.
Right. That's true. Look, many people will make a cholent in the oven.
Yeah.
I know people make this. People make cholent in the oven. They put it in before Shabbos and it stays in the oven until Shabbos day. That's totally fine, by the way. Mm-hmm. Totally fine. I know people sometimes are. I remember once by somebody, someone called me and said, not in the community, someone I knew from different, setting, and they live in Riverdale, and they went to a meal, and they'd gone over to, I think, one of the rabbis at one of the shuls there for a meal, and they said they made cholent, and it was in the oven, and they came and pulled it out on Shabbos day. So the rabbi said, yeah, of course, it's not no problem. Once you start taking it out and then putting it back, okay, it's a whole discussion. But it's look, there are some avenues here. Again, that relies on the lenient opinion. So to the extent, and again, one of the reasons that I personally hesitated because the interpretation of the Ran is under question, right? Even if you rely on the Ran, which is fine to rely on the Ran, the interpretation of it of the inside the kira is a sort of a suffix. So even if I think we can rely on the first position, which allows us to reheat food, on a blech without worrying about certain conditions, something to think about. But I those who are lenient and relying on this, who am I to say that I'm more intelligent than the Rama? Yeah, Tommy.
Shabbos day, when you're talking about that, you're talking about liquid or just solids?
Once,
no liquid.
even the Mishnah Berurah and Samach Vav said, as long as Kadesh lo yitztane. Or sorry, I think that once it cools down, right? The reason you're putting it back is you don't want it to cool down. But once it cools down, I don't think that that's something that we would allow to be put back into the kira, right? That's the.
It's not bishul.
Definitely not bishul, no question. But the problem is that it's you have this other factor of nira kemivashel, that it appears as if you're cooking it. If it's cooled down completely, right? And I think that putting it back in would be a problem of nira kemivashel, whereas opposed if it's still warm from the previous heating up, all you're saying is that this is a continuation of that shehiyah. So I don't know. I'm not personally comfortable with the idea that that one could do that on Shabbos day if like the food had been in the refrigerator, it cooled down, and then you pull it out in the morning. I think there you can rely upon putting it on top of it, but putting it in already is then you have to circumvent nira kemivashel, and I don't think that's easy to do when things have cooled down completely. Again, it's rabbinic. I agree with you. We're not dealing with a dough rice.
Do you not have that issue putting it on top of the stove?
No, because so you typically do, right? Unless it's group, right? If it's grufa ktuma, then that helps. But even then, it's still in lyric mavashal. So yes, the kula that would exist here by following the Ran would be that you can take the food out of the refrigerator and then you could put it on top of there, which I guess would be I hear your point. You're saying I already circumvented Nir Kavashal. If I'm allowing that, then what's the difference? Yeah, I hear. Maybe you're right.
Everybody's invited for lunch this Shabbos.
What was that?
Everybody's invited for lunch this Shabbos.
Right. Right. I need to think about that. I want a pen with me. I actually want to write this down so I don't forget to look at. I want to do some more digging on this question because my understanding is that that's not meaning. If you kept that food over that let's say in the oven, and you tell me you have a Shabbos oven that doesn't really readjust based on anything that you do. Right. So why should it be an issue to put it inside if you're following the lenient opinion here? Right. Which is I just want to repeat, it's under question, even if you follow the Ran, whether that's what the Ran meant. So that's one of the reasons that probably we shy away from this. But I want to dig a little more on this question. I want to ask my Rebbe about that question. It's a good question.
I appreciate it.
By the way, Steve, you came a couple minutes afterwards. We're using your. I gave it a shot here, and Lloyd tested it out before, so it's actually doing wonders over here. So thank you very much. So we have a new implement in our shear to hear everything around the table. Prayer for you. Okay. So let's jump into where we left off last week, which was this in my edition, second to last line of the Ramah, where it says second to last line where it says Yesh Omrim, right? Where there's an ayin in parentheses. Okay. Yesh Omrim. Dechol shehu samuch lechashecha o samuch levarchu shu kabbalah Shabbos ledidan. אם הוא סמוך כל כך שאם נצטנן הקדרה אי אפשר להרתיחה מבעוד יום, דינו כמו בשבס עצמו. He says here, now, actually, before I translate it, let's read the Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Ayin, who gives us an introduction to what is being said here. He says, in his words, Sif Katan Ayin, Kedei lahavin divrei hayesh omrim, in order to understand the yesh omrim, this other opinion, mukhrach ani laharich ktsas. He says, let me speak at length for a little bit, which is a funny term. Laharich ktsas. I'm going to speak at length for a little bit. Okay. Dehine hatosos v'harosh v'siyasa. The Ashkenazi gedolim. The Ashkenazi Rishonim, Tosos and the Rosh. Hochichu. They prove, they take the opinion. The Be'er of Shabbos, Namishach Dine Chazar. There is a law of Chazara, even relevant to Erev Shabbos, not just as I have been presenting it to this point, as being an on Shabbos issue, but it is an Erev Shabbos issue. Now, we already saw one opinion, by the way, that claims that Chazara is an Erev Shabbos issue, or at least relates to Erev Shabbos. And that is the Ran's opinion. The Ran had said that the Chazara only applies if the food was on the fire Erev Shabbos, and then it was removed on Shabbos. Is removed Erev Shabbos, and then is replaced onto the fire on Shabbos. So there is some relevance of Erev Shabbos to Chazara, though the actual placing of the Chazara, of the returning of the fire, happens on Shabbos in this case, according to the Ran. But according to Tosfos and the Rosh, they take it a lot further, and they say, no, there's Chazara returning food to the fire that can take place on Erev Shabbos. And he gives a case. Let's say you remove the food that's over the fire, on top, that's in the kira, on the kira, Erev Shabbos. Oh, man, hatanur lididan, or what we call today an oven. Okay, we don't call it a kira, we call it an oven and a tanur. So asur, and that doesn't mean the Talmudic tanur, means what we call an oven. It is forbidden to return this food to that fire in the kira, on the kira, unless the conditions of garuf v'katum are met. Okay. V'hikshu al zeh. And the Balei Atosus and the Rosh ask on this. If Chazara applies on Erev Shabbos, Shabbos starts at 7 o'clock. And at 6 o'clock, I take it off the fire, the food. And then I return it to the fire at 6:30. So you're telling me, Tosos and the Rosh, that I have to meet the conditions of Chazara. I have to have it in my hand. I have to have it in my mind. Never heard of this before, right? So the question is asked, okay, then it should be Asr all of Friday. If you're going to take it to its logical conclusion here, that let's take it, you take it off in the morning. I was cooking at 8 in the morning, 6 in the morning. I'm cooking. I finish cooking. I take it off the fire. So you tell me when I put it back on later to reheat it, I had to have you holding it the whole time. Daito lahachzir, oda biyado. So it doesn't make any sense. There's lo yachol lahachzir. No one will be able to do chazara. Shabbos is ruined. So how could you have such an interpretation? So lemaisa, it can't mean all day, because then Shabbos would never happen. So what shear on Friday afternoon does suddenly chazara come back into play? Umaske. And the conclusion that Tosfos and the Rosh reach, if it's close to dark, kolkach, to the point, ad she'im hayakar, if the food was cold, let's say room temperature, it would not be able to boil in the time that I have now, the time left between it now and Shabbos starting. So, in my example, the Shabbos starts at 7, I do Chazara at 6:30. But everybody knows that in order to get this back up to being hot again, to be boiling, it would take 31 minutes. And therefore, when Shabbos starts, this thing is not boiling yet from 6:30 to 7, because it takes till 7:01. So if that's the case, then osru az lahachzir below grifa. Then the rules of chazara apply without, it would be it would be impossible to do chazara unless the conditions of grufa ketuma are met. Right, that I rake the coals out of the oven or the side of the oven, the miyah mutar, because if it were allowed, if we were allowing you to put it on at 6:30, even though it's not going to boil until 7:01 and Shabbos started at 7, then what might people do? The miyah mutar az lahachzir yachzir gam b'Shabbos. When it's time to do chazara, I'll do chazara on Shabbos also without properly making sure that things are set up. It's grufo ketuma. I'll make the mistakes of allowing myself to do this on Shabbos. V'chula chada gzeirahi. This is all one big gzeira that the rabbis made. Don't start telling me it's a gzeira l'gzeira. It's already a rabbinic rule, and now you're making a rabbinic rule of Erev Shabbos on the rabbinic rule. No. He says that's all one decree. With Shabbos, the reason the Shabbos part of the gzeira is osur shamayachata. We talk about it at length, right? Because maybe you'll stoke the coals. You want to adjust the heat so that the food heats up properly. Now, the Erev Shabbos part is because you might do that, but it's all part of one gzeira that the rabbis made. And that is the opinion of the Yesh Omer that is being referred to here that we just read a moment ago. She's Kira Rama, that the Rama mentions. The Hayesh Mekila, and we'll see that there's a lenient opinion in just a moment. Who is that? Hudas Rashi v'siyasa. That is Rashi's opinion, and those who agree with Rashi. The Rashi's opinion is Chazar only applies on Shabbos. There's no such thing as Chazar on Erev Shabbos, which is how I've been presenting it to this point. But now we are aware there is a second reading of the Gemara that extends Chazara to Erev Shabbos. So let's go back now to reading the line that we read, which was that there are those that say, back to the Rama, that anything that's close to dark or close to Baruch, which is our Kabbalah Shabbos, that's how we accept Shabbos, practically speaking, and I'll talk about that more in a second. If that time, whether it's the time for Shul, right, for Baruch, or the time that the sun goes down, if it's close to one of those times, kolkach, so close that ishim nitztanim, hakader, that the pot has cooled down, a pot that has cooled down, it will not be able to reach a sort of a boiling point, Erev Shabbos, at this particular juncture when you're putting it on, because it's too close to Shabbos. Dino kemo b'Shabbos atzal. We treat it like Shabbos itself. And now that having read the Mishnah Berurah's excellent, I think, introduction to that comment, I don't need to explain it to you further what he's trying to say. It is it's like Shabbos according to the opinion of Tosfos and the Rush. Okay, now, why have you never heard of this before? Because the Ramah continues and says, "V'yesh makilam bazeh." There are those that are lenient on this. V'haminhag lahakel. And the practice is to be lenient. Ach, like any good Ashkenazi, tov lahachmir b'makom she'en tzorich kol kach. If you don't have such a great need, so be machmir. Try to, make sure it's already grufa ketuma. The knobs are covered, the dials are covered prior to Shabbos starting. That would be sufficient to get if you're able to. Okay. I'll leave it to you to figure out if you're able to.
Am I wrong, or didn't we say that something had to be at least cooked enough before to be considered cooked? And this kind of violates that. So this robber would take it, and he would, because he was in a hurry, he would eat it, right?
Yes.
So here we're saying, in your example, 31 minutes, it would have been cooked enough at 30 minutes for him to eat it. So there shouldn't be any question at all.
So here we're not talking about whether it's cooked or not cooked. I probably appreciate you bringing that up, Steve. I want to clarify that. And there's a sticky point here, because you could have shahiyah on food. You could put food on that's cooked to machal ben drusai, the robber, how that standard. You could put it on the fire according to Ashkenazim. Right? We follow the lenient opinion, the second opinion, if you remember, Akasif Aleph. And we said that's fine. But wait a minute, I thought we just read right now that putting it on the fire 30 minutes before Shabbos is not okay. So there's a distinction made. Once it's cooked, no longer do we treated only under the category of shehiyah, but now it's under a different category of chazara. No one would make the mistake, the Mishnah is going to point out, no one will make the mistake of saying, oh, since I put the food on in a shehiyah manner where it wasn't fully cooked yet before Shabbos, I won't make the mistake that on Shabbos that's okay, because we're talking about bishul at that point, right? I'm doing bishul 30 minutes before Shabbos, then it's only cooked kamacha ben drusai. So I'm not going to then transfer that mistake to Shabbos and say, well, that means I can put it on the fire when it's not fully cooked on Shabbos. Everyone's careful about their rices. The Rabbanans, people are less careful according to this approach. And that's why there's a different standard, right? So here, you're absolutely right, Steve. Like the
First time cooking here.
Yeah, this is obviously, I would think this example, it's fully cooked. None of these examples could be a get off the ground if they're not fully cooked. Then it's not yet in the category where it could be called chazara if it's not fully cooked. If it's not fully cooked, it's more lenient than this situation. The Mishnah Berurah is going to point out this ironic point. I don't know if it's ironic, but it's at least it could to the just onlooker, this may look inconsistent, but he's basically saying it's a different definition of what's going on right now. Let's take a look at those comments of the Mishnah Berurah.
One question: if
Yes,
you don't want it boiling, you just want it lukewarm.
Yeah.
Not hot. Is there an issue?
If you just want it to be lukewarm and not hot.
You don't want it boiling.
Yeah, so I think that my gut would say that the rabbis here made a gzeira, which is that it has to reach the point at which the temperature kind of at which it was being cooked. That we understand, like when you're cooking, you've just finished cooking something, you take it right out of the oven. It's much harder than if you're just trying to reheat it, as you're alluding to it. Right? So my gut says that even though it only takes 15, in my example, it takes, let's say, 15 minutes to get to the temperature that I desire to just reheat it, and it takes 31 minutes to cook it, 6:30 would still be an issue, even if I'm only intending to put it on for 15 minutes, because the whole gzeira is about bringing it up to a boil. That's my gut and how to read this. Now, again, I'm not saying I cannot say that I have been machmir for this, for the opinion that you should be careful to do chazara Erev Shabbos. I probably fall personally in my that doesn't mean anything, but I personally fall into the category of the minhag, following the minhag here that the Rama mentions, which is rely. There's no such thing as chazara on Erev Shabbos, like Rashi says. If you even were following that, I think you would have to be consistent about it. The standard is bringing it up to a boil, even if that's not your intention. That's still the standard in terms of how to measure this. Okay, let's look at the Mishnah Berurah, Ayin Aleph. Sif Katan Ayin Aleph. By the way, see, we've made 71 comments into the Mishnah Berurah. By the way, it's quite a journey to get through the Siman, but we're making headway here. Okay. Oh, Samuch levarchu. Well, what does that say about Baruchu? Taking in Shabbos early, right? Otherwise, Baruchu is irrelevant. If you're saying Baruchu after Shabbos started, it's not an important calculation here. But let's say it's like the summer. We do here Shabbos. We have Mincha 7, and by the time you get to Baruchu, it's 7:20, something like that. So what about this? So Bizmanam, in their days, Hayinogin Lomar Baruchu behekte. They would bring in Shabbos early by saying Baruchu early. Maybe it's Yeridas Hadorah, so we return back to those days. I don't know. There's something the Mishnah Berurah only davened the right zman. Not right zman. At the zman of Shkia, of sunset, which is certainly not the historical minhag, by the way, in Ashkenazi Jewry. I remember doing a paper on the Trumas Hadeshen, who lived in Austria, 15th century, something like that. And there are questions he receives. I think the first question he got, he has a whole 354 questions, one for each day of the year in his Chuvos book. And first Shaila talks about the Zman Kriya Shema. And they say, do we say Shema too early here? And do we need to say it later? And there's a whole topic, in Shas. The first stuff of Brachos deals with this, long Tosfos. The question in the midst of answering the question, he reports that on Friday night they said they davened so early that they davened, they went home, they ate their meal, and then there was a minhag to walk along the river there. I'm forgetting the city where in Austria it was, but he says the name of the river. And they would walk along the the riverbank. The Jews would go and take walks on Friday nights. Well, it was still light out. So obviously, there's a long, when in the summer, particularly when in Ashkenazi countries, the summer days are long. They took Shabbos in early. I guess, I don't know, in Radin, they didn't. I mean, this comment makes it sound like Bismanam, in their days, they did Shabbos early, so this is a problem for them. But I think it was a problem for Ashkenazi Jewry today. It was, certainly in the medieval period. I think it is still to this day a big question that we have to deal with, about taking in Shabbos early and some halachos that are relevant to that. So the Kamash V'lav, the Kevin, the Ayei Baruch Hu Kabbalah Shabbos. Since Baruch Hu is accepting Shabbos, when you start Marva, you're accepting the day of Shabbos early. Havek Shabbos Gamor. I mean, it is Shabbos. Once you take Shabbos in early, we can start to argue and finagle about the one question about, are you chayav achatas if you violate Shabbos? You took in Shabbos early, and you violate a biblical commandment. Are you chayav achatas or not? Right? Did you have to bring a korban? That's probably the one nafkamina, which is obviously not relevant in our day, about the status of Erev Shabbos. There are other things, relevant too. If you're in a difficult situation, maybe there's some leniency, al yedei anoch, in a non-Jew, to do certain things before its 3 stars are out. But end of the day, Shabbos is Shabbos. If you took it Shabbos early, you can't do anything now. You're abiding by the laws of Shabbos. But so if you did you do Shabbos early? So then, in my example, where let's say Shabbos starts at 8, Baruch Hu is at 7. You want to put the food on at 6:30. It takes 31 minutes to boil. It would be prohibited, according to the Tosfos opinion, to put it on unless I meet the conditions of Grufa Ktuma Erev Shabbos. Okay, that's all he's trying to say here. That Baruch Hu taking in Shabbos early, this would apply the same standard. But not everyone agrees to that. The Magen of Ram, Ram Gambiner, disagrees and says that's nonsense. The rabbis made a decree. Lekula or lechumer, by the way. So Hinda, asked me the question. I said, no, you have to be machmir, I think, in that situation, right? Even though you only want to heat it up for 15 minutes. But the Magen Rav says the rabbis mentioned the shir, kodem chashecha, before dark. They didn't say before Baruch Hu. So even if you do Kabbalah Shabbos early, my example, 8 o'clock is Shabbos starting. Baruch Hu is at 7. Takes 31 minutes to heat up to boil into a boil. 6:30 is fine because sunset's not till 8. Even if you're going to say Baruch Hu at 7 o'clock, that would be the interpretation of the Magen of Ram. He disagrees outright with the Ramah's extension of this idea that of Tosfos and the Rush, that the Baruch Hu is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. If it's already Shabbos, so that's a different story when you're putting it on. Then you have other rules. You have the rules of Shabbos to worry about. But Erev Shabbos, nothing to worry about, according to Magen of Ram. Ayin Beis. And by the way, I'll just add one point here. Today, this would need to be updated. In the days of the Ramah, there was no such thing as what we call today the Tefillah of Kabbalah Shabbos. Didn't exist. The Tefillah of Kabbalah Shabbos came into being in the Tzfat in the 17th century, I want to say. And the Ramah lives earlier than this. This is not something that would have been on his radar at all. There may be an older minhag to say Mizmor Shir Liyom Shabbos to start Shabbos. That may be there, but they didn't sing Lechadodi. Lechadodi was composed by Rosh Shlomo Alchemist. Like this, there's no way, whatever. The bottom line is, Kabbalah Shabbos is a relatively new tefillah in Jewish history. So even today, we don't assume that when you say Kabbalah Shabbos that you've accepted Shabbos. So let's say you actually think back to the pandemic when we were on this mode, medium to have Kabbalah Shabbos. We said it through Lechadodi, and then we stopped because when you say Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos, the assumption halachically is that that's accepting Shabbos, saying this is the Mizmor, this is the song for Shabbos, because now it's Shabbos. So Mizmor Shili Yom Shabbos today is when we accept Shabbos if you're going to accept it early. So I just want to clarify that it's not Baruch Hu today. It'll be Mizmor Shili Yom Shabbos is the accepted common practice. If you're in the earlier part of Kabbalah Shabbos and you suddenly remember something that requires you to do malacha and it's not sunset, totally fine. Go for it. It's not an issue at all. Yeah, Lloyd. Yes. Yeah. No, they're good. Okay. All right. Next comment here. Ayin Beis. Even if it's before sunset to a certain amount of time, but it's not going to be able to boil in that amount of time. Dino kamo Shabbos. Okay, as we said, that we treat it like Shabbos at that point for the purposes of grufa ketuma. In order to put that food on that fire, it has to be garufa ketuma. Okay. Sorry, you just said this now. Just regards to grufa ketuma like Shabbos. I had to have it in mind since it was cooked at 6 a.m. that I have to return it to the fire. Come on, I went to work in the media in the interim. I took a 10-minute power nap on my desk. I didn't think about it the whole day. That's fine. I could put it in the refrigerator in the meantime. It's fine. Go in the karka. The fridge is worse than the karka, by the way, probably because that's like definitely like I'm putting it away for now. That you don't need to meet those conditions. Just grufa ketuma. V'chai legamre. Now, if it's completely raw, as I've mentioned a number of times, if it's completely raw, shari lahachzir. Now, but that's fine. I wouldn't even call it chazara. That's called cooking, right? You're just allowed to put it on the fire because why? Samach l'chashecha, close to dark, mamish. Like really, 5 minutes before you could turn your sholem on. You don't have to cover the knobs even. Not a problem. Now, if you want to return it, if you take it off and return it to the fire on Shabbos, make sure you cover your knobs on your dials. But if you're no plan to, I'm gonna take the crock pot off one time and that's it. You don't even really cover the knobs in that situation. Why? Afilu le'ena grufa uktuma. Even if it's not grufa ketuma, it's not a problem to put it on 5 minutes before Shabbos. Moshe Kasav l'sef aleph, as we talked about previously, because when it's raw, your mind is off of it. No one's gonna. You're not playing with the fire because it's not gonna be ready till lunch. And if I play with the fire, it might even burn because it'll be too hot too quickly. Haraya, I don't know about you, what everyone does in their home. When I make cholent before Shabbos, I don't turn it to high, turn it to low. Right? I don't want it to be to cook so quickly because then I'm in trouble. Which is all what Sif Gimel is going to be about when we get to Sif Gimel, which is going to be Hamashkim Baboker. It starts with you wake up in the morning, and you see the food is burning. And what do you do to save your food? It's going to burn. How do I save my food? That's going to be Sif Gimel. Let's go to Ayin Gimel, Mishnah Berurah. Dafka, right, that it's like Shabbos itself, but Dafka Achar Shenikmar Kol Bishul HaKadeira. After you've completed all the Bishul, this goes to your point, Steve, it has to be fully cooked. Umanicha La'amod Halakira. Ad ha'erev lishmor chuma, and then I'm putting it back on the fire to keep it hot. Bazehu de machmarina. That's when we're machmir. In Nitala, if I take it off, shol lahachzir l'she'ena grufa, that I can't put it back on unless it's not grufa, uktuma. That's when I have to be machmir. About kolzman shalom nizbashal kol talk about if it's not fully cooked. This again was exactly Steve's point. Notla machzira b'chol gam. I can take it off, put it back on, not a problem. It's still in the parsha of cooking, right? The lo shach lemigzar. You can't make a gzera the yachzir gam b'Shabbos. That I might also do a chazar on Shabbos, so that's why I can't. It's not chazar right now. I'm still cooking. No one's going to make that mistake. Dzeu mevashal b'Shabbos, right? What I'm going to make a mistake. If I could put it now to cook erev Shabbos, I won't make the mistake that I could cook on Shabbos. No one's going to make that mistake. Everyone knows you can't cook on Shabbos. That's a basic rule. Pshita, the mizdar b'hachi. Of course, I'm going to be careful about not cooking on Shabbos. Afilu isharis lahachzir mivoron. Even if I'm allowed to return it to the fire to cook on erev Shabbos, I'm not going to make a mistake on Shabbos that I can cook. Yesh machmir bazeh. There are even those who are lo machmir. In that case, by the way, mishum lo plug. They say no differentiation. 31 minutes to get it to a boil. Then 30 minutes before Shabbos, it has to be grufa ketuma. I don't care if it's cooked or not cooked. Okay. I think I told the story many times, right? If you're Rav Amital's story was if you read the Mishnah Berurah and you see, V'yesh machmir bazeh, or you see Bal Nefesh Yachmir al Atzmos. Oh, very nice, not me. Okay, Tommy, go ahead.
Yeah, there seems to be a contradiction here.
Yes.
We're talking about not putting something in an oven because Marit Ayin, the people think you're going to cook. right here it says people know you're not going to cook it on Shabbos. So I mean, it's not being very consistent here.
Right. So you're saying that the part of the problem of chazar is that it looks like you're cooking, right?
Yeah, I mean, it says on the other side, it says it's cooking. Here it says nobody will think you're cooking. So I don't know, why different rules?
Well, here it's saying that the person themselves, right, won't make the mistake to cook on Shabbos if you tell them that they can cook on Arab Shabbos, basically. That's basically what we're saying here. Now, but what you're pointing out is that, sorry, I think the distinction is, which is very slight, is that if you put it in on Shabbos into a place where cooking takes place, it gives the appearance of cooking. It's not obviously it's not cooking. And in the case that we just described here, what we're saying is we're not worried that you to say don't cook on Erev Shabbos unless certain conditions are met, like Rufa Ketuma is met, because you might cook on Shabbos. No one's going to make a mistake. And by the way, I'll add one more thing. This may be there are sort of two tracks that are at play here. One is Nira Kemevashel, it gives the appearance of cooking, but the other one is Shameyachata Begechal, might stoke the coals and adjust the flame. So if I tell you that you can adjust, you can have a non-Grufa Ketuma situation 30 minutes before Shabbos where you're cooking food, no one will make so you're playing with the fire, right? You're stoking the coals and you're making it hotter. No one will then transpose that situation to on Shabbos and say, well, now I can play with the fire on Shabbos because I could do it 30 minutes before Shabbos. So it may be sort of working more along that track. I hear your point. I think there can be this distinction made between the two cases. I hear your point, though. I hear your point. So anyways, we are concerned that it gives the appearance of cooking, but we're not worried that someone's going to adjust the flames to cook on Shabbos. But again, it appears that it's cooking. It's working on the very slight difference, but I think it's a slightly different track. Again, there are these two tracks that are guiding Chazar. Hinda, yeah, it looks like you wanted to jump in here. No, okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No.
Oh, you're good. Okay, fine. Okay, where are we here? Okay, so we're up to Ayin Daled, but what's good to be Machmir. The conclusion, if you're Machmir, is that you don't take the pot off the kira and then put it back on, on top of the oven, as if it's not Garof Katum, Samuch Chashecha, close to dark. The Tanur Shalano Dino Kakira, even though our oven is like a kira, Habakira Gufe, with kira itself, Yesh Lahachmir Ladezo. Also with a kira, if you're being Machmir for this opinion, a kira is also relevant to the Chumrah. If it's Mukara for Katum, so Mutar Af Shabbos, then you can do Chazara on Shabbos also. Once you're Gara for Katum, you open the door for a lot of potential ways to reheat food. Okay, where are we here now? Okay, let's quickly finish up the Ramah here. We'll try our best. Top line of the Ramah here on this page. Dafka al gabe kira mamish. We're talking about on top of a kira. Dafka al gabe kira mamish of alismoch, but to place it next to the kira. Afilu samuch la'esh b'makom shayad saledes bo. Shar. When is the chumrah relevant here? The chumrah is relevant. The chumrah is relevant when we're talking about on the kira itself. That's when you have to be machmir 30 minutes before, in my example, 30 minutes before Shabbos, right? But if you're talking about smicha, putting it next to the fire, not on the fire, it's next to it. It's not going to get quite as hot. Even if that spot, though, close to the fire, does get to the point of yad saledes, meaning it can get to the point where if you put your hand in that spot, I'm going to pull it away because it could burn me. That is still okay. Samuch lachashecha, close to dark, without any of the conditions of, it has to be gruf, ketuma. No, some smicha is okay. And let's look at the Mishnah Berurah here. Al gabe kira mamish hainu debazeh yesh osrim chazar samuch lachashecha. When it's on the kira, okay, then there are those who prohibit returning it close to dark, as we talked about, kaniz kaleel. Ayin vav makom sheyatzu leresbo, in a place where your hand could get burned from it. The ein hayatzu leresbo, if it's a place where the heat is not to the point where it could burn your hand or you have to pull it away. I feel with Shabbos shari, then you could put it there on Shabbos too. if it's so not hot, it's nothing to worry about. Samuch l'chashecha, ayin zayin here. Afilu nitztanin legamri, if it completely cools down, meaning room temperature. Ilo nitztanin legamri, if it hasn't completely cooled down to room temperature. Afilu b'Shabbos shari. Then even on Shabbos you can return this. So you could do smicha lechatchila. You put it right next to the fire, not on top, but next to it on Shabbos. Not a problem at all. Even if if it's very, very hot in that spot, where it's yatsa leresbo in that spot, you could burn your hand in that spot, in theory, or at least you have to pull it away because you have a fear of burning it. So Kemoshe Kosav b'Siman Shin Yud Ches, if Tezvav Ba'agal, as the Ramo writes in the Siman Shin Yud Ches, that if it hasn't cooled down completely, right, so you're allowed to put it back on the fire. By the way, I don't even think this is just about smicha. By the way, if it has, you could do chazara, and not be worried about nirek and mivashel. Right? If it's completely cooled down, then you lost one of the tanai chazara. It's not rotachas still. It's not hot. So then it's a question of whether what's the heat source? Is this chazara on top of a fire? If so, is it grufa ketuma? Then you have to go through all these calculations about how to be able to return food to the heat source, and what's allowed, what's not allowed. But if it's still not room temperature, then you're good. You're in a good place. Okay. Lastly, here, let's hold off. It's already 8:30. I have to go. So we'll just finish up this Rama next time. It should take us just a few minutes. It's just talking about the Talmudic tanurs, which again, not so relevant in our day and age to know every halacha about it, but we'll learn it. They talk about the tanur. There's no distinction about smicha. These things we'll talk about the distinctions that can or cannot be made. And then we'll go on to Sif Gimel, which talks about Hamashkim Baboker, as I talked about. You wake up in the morning on Shabbos morning and you see, if I don't take action now, this food will burn by the time we get to lunch. And how do I save the day in a halachically appropriate way? It's already burning. Can I save it before it's completely a goner food that has to go in the garbage? And this will touch on putting this idea about a kedera al gabe kedera blech. Okay, maybe you've heard the term. If you haven't heard the term, it's okay. I'll introduce it to you next time. And so we'll go from there. Okay, any questions? Last questions before, and I know I actually want to follow up on the question about putting it into the oven. If you, let's say, follow the Ramah's position and you have the food in the oven during Bein Hashmashos, and you have one of these Shabbos mode ovens that is not going to be an issue to open and close, is there an issue to return it into the oven if you're following that leniency? I have to double check that question. I want to do proper rabbinic research. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if not, I wish everybody a wonderful day, and I will hopefully I'll see some of you in person here, Scarsdale, and those who are away, enjoy your time away.
Thank you.
You know.
Thank you.